Welcome back to this chamber, and indeed welcome to this district planning meeting today, Thursday the 30th of September 2021. The setup for this meeting has been designed to mitigate for COVID. Therefore, in the interests of member and officer safety, all present should work to the protocols agreed at Council on the 2nd of September 2021. As this meeting is being streamed live and recorded for the benefit of the camera, my name is Councillor Mark Hurd and I'm the chairman of this committee. By being present in this meeting, you are giving consent to being recorded. During each item, members, please put your hand up if you wish to speak, and I will invite you at the appropriate time. Please note the YouTube live stream and sound recording is dependent on the correct use of microphones. Therefore, when invited to speak, please remember to turn them on, referencing a page or paragraph number on the agenda papers, and keep your contributions clear and concise. And please remember to turn off your microphone when finished. Finally, I draw your attention to the notices on the agenda papers regarding the different levels within the chamber, and advise that the fire exit is the door to my left behind this top table. Bernard, can I have apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillors Bell, Durham, Helm, Jarvis, Morley, Nunn and Skeens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 3 is declarations of interest. Members are reminded that they are required to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests which they know they might have in items of business on the agenda having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8 inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. They are reminded that they will need to repeat their declarations at the appropriate point in the meeting and leave the room if required under the Code of Conduct. Unforeseen interests must be declared similarly at the appropriate time. Do we have any members who wish to declare an interest? Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chairman, and non-pecuniary as a member of Essex County Council who are consultees. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Stamp.
Yes, the same as Councillor Fleming. I'm a member of Essex County Council, non-pecuniary, and they're consultees on some of the applications. Bye.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards, did I see your hand?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My ward is the Heybridge West Ward for item number 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Yeah, I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest. I'm a Heybridge West Ward member, and also my daughter frequents McDonald's and will probably kill me if I do anything to harm them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fluker.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to declare this, but another member's pointed it out that I have been known to frequent McDonald's restaurant, like I guess a lot of other people.
I'm sure we all have. Yeah. Councillor Boyce.
Thank you, Chairman. I officially opened McDonald's when it first arrived.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4 then, members. Minutes of the previous meeting. So it's recommended that the minutes of this meeting, the District Planning Committee was held on the 5th of August, they're found on pages 7 to 10 are approved as a true and accurate record. They're presented for accuracy only. I so move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mays, thank you very much. If any member wishes to raise any matter of accuracy, please indicate they wish to speak. Are you happy to accept those by assent? Thank you. We move on now to agenda item 5, 21/00184/RES. This is land at Broad Street, Green Road and Langford Road and Maypole Road, Great Totham, Heybridge, Langford and Ulting. This has been referred to this committee as a strategic site within the strategic submitted local development plan, and the principle of the development has been accepted as the site forms part of the North Heybridge Garden suburb. I understand, Mr. Johnson, that you're presenting this.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, I'll hand over to you then in that case. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This application represents the first reserved matter submission for the North Heybridge Gardens suburb, strategic site reference S2D, in relation to the hybrid planning consent granted on appeal on the 25th of October 2019 under reference 15/00419 out. The development granted on appeal on the reference was a part outline, part detailed hybrid applications for mixed use development. At 3.1.2 of the report, the full description is set out. The only thing I'll point out in terms of the description is that it being an outline and part detailed, the only detailed elements related to the relief road between Broad Street Green Road and Langford Road, and also the construction of initial gas and electricity substations. All the other elements are the outline, of which this is the first submission. So I'll just take you through the slides and sort of speak to the slides and comment at the same time. So here we have the location plan. We've got the broad location plan here, the applicant's ownership of land outlined in blue, and also the application site in red. Then we can see the hatched area in the middle, which specifically relates to this element of the outline application. As stated in the description, this element relates to the landscaping of largely along the relief road, and those areas you can see highlighted there. And just to sort of point out, within the hatched areas, those sort of hexagonal shaped areas do represent the outline of the residential areas, parcels 1 and 2, of which no detailed elements are part of this application, but is to show the landscaping that will be flanking those. So here we have the relief road and the part of the area in more detail there. So just turning to the commentary. The first reserved matters application relates to the strategic landscaping elements within the first phase of the development. Subsequent landscaping reserved matters on the rest of the site will be submitted in respect of future phases. And for clarification, this is the first of 5 phases. The submission covers the strategic landscaping, roads, paths, open spaces, and earthworks. The application does not include, as I mentioned just now, any part of the actual relief road, as that layout was approved under the detailed application. However, it does include the landscaping, as I said earlier, along the size of phase 1 of the relief road. Consent 15/00412, the hybrid application, also approved a number of parameter plans which are relevant to this reserved matter submission, which includes the land use parameter plan, the green and blue infrastructure parameter plan, and the access and movement parameter plan. And the outline consent requires that these reserved matters are carried out in accordance with those plans. And just to sort of point out, the report makes reference to a number of other applications which have been submitted under conditional discharge throughout, which are relevant to certain of the elements within this application which we have here. So 3.1.4, condition 11 of the outline application required that before or concurrent with the first reserved matters application for this site, which is this application, a strategic phasing plan for the site was to be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. A strategic phasing plan was submitted and agreed under reference 20-05039, which is a discharge of condition application. This application covers a strategic landscaping for the phase 1 area of the development. A subsequent submission will cover the residential parcels within the phase 1 area. So that phasing plan denotes how these applications will come through. And the phasing plan has been agreed that this would be the first phase, and the first phase will cover the various elements. So this is the landscaping, the residential for phase one will also be submitted, but it will be relating to that phase. And I'm just drawing this clarity for members so you can be aware that this is it. The phases will relate to the various parts of the development as they come through for the phasing of the scheme. So again, just in more detail here, and just to point out, you can see the sort of, well, elliptical type shapes within some of these areas, the hatched areas, the DR001, DR003. Those elliptical areas relate to the attenuation basins that form part of the Sustainable Urban Drainage Scheme, as is within the report. So again, just while that plan is up, just to draw that to your attention. So the key elements of the strategic landscaping covered in this submission are landscaping along the western section of the relief road. So this is the area we're talking along here. Design of the open space at the entrance of the site from the relief road / Maypole road. So this is this area here. This will be the main entrance into the site. The design of the main spine road, which runs through the main section of the site covered by phase one. This is our spine road running through here. The design of green corridors that form the eastern boundaries of residential parcels 1 and 2, which are also included within phase one. As I said before, the residential parcels and their development is not part of this application. Apologies. So these are the green corridors. This is parcel 1, residential parcel 1 and 2. These are the green corridors which run along the eastern edge. The design of the central open space within phase one, containing a formal garden and play area, the LEAP, which is a locally equipped area of play, which is located opposite the future site of the school approved under the outline application. So this is this area here. The LEAP is within here. There are a number of orchards again within this site, and the area of the future school will be in this area here. The design of the acoustic bund that lies to the south of the relief road and the north of the residential parcel 1 within phase 1. So the bund is within this area here. It's 3.1.7 sets out condition 31. Any reserved matters application made pursuant to this approval that seeks the approval of landscaping details shall include a detailed landscaping scheme. This reserved matters application is fundamentally tied in with the directions under those conditions, hence the compartmentalization of these applications for us to consider the particular elements of it. This application has been supported by a detailed landscaping scheme and landscaping statement, which accords with the requirements of condition 31. This submission also includes details to comply with condition 28, which is a network of pedestrian and cycle routes along those main arteries that we see in that plan there. The submission also includes details to comply with condition 28 and condition 18, the arboricultural report. It must be noted that condition 31, landscaping details, is split into 2 parts. And the 2 parts of condition 31 was agreed to be split into two parts under a non-material planning application which was submitted earlier on this year. So in reading condition 31, there are now two parts of it, A and a B. This relates to the A section of condition 31. So again, just drilling down in a bit more detail here. And as pointed out, these are the green corridors running down. There's also open space along here. To the south of this open space is the Bellway site, which we're familiar with. And again, just pointing out these attenuation basins as part of the sustainable urban drainage system. So in conclusion, and then I'll just run through the remainder of the slides, the principle of the development of the site has been accepted as the site forms part of the North Heybridge Garden Suburb, strategic site S2D. The strategic landscaping shown for phase 1 of the development is considered to accord with the North Heybridge Strategic Master Plan Framework, the North Heybridge Strategic Design Code, and the outline planning permission to which it relates. It is considered that this first phase of strategic landscaping sets out a well-designed framework of green spaces and linkages that will ensure the development as a whole delivers the high-quality, vibrant, and distinctive neighborhoods that the site aims to achieve. So again, just moving through the remainder of plans, we can see the leap area, the gardens, as I mentioned earlier, general layout arrangement. Can always come back to any of these slides if members do wish. Again, just a cross section of some of the attenuation basins, known as Pond 1 in that slide. These are the other basins that ran along the eastern section of the residential parcels and cross sections, showing the sloping size and the depth. As this is a landscaping proposals, the sustainable urban drainage system is incorporated into the landscaping proposals. Obviously, the use of these basins will depend on the ambient weather conditions as they may be throughout the duration of this development. Again, just a few more details here. There. Ditch widening goes, just going into some of the details. I'll just skip through this fairly quickly. This is the noise bund section. The noise bund section, as mentioned earlier, provides the acoustic barrier to the residential that will be delivered under parcel 1. That's the leap, more detailed. And here are just some surface and curbing arrangements. Can always come back to this. This is a useful slide showing the cross section, showing the bund there, the relief road. We can see the ditch, that's the swale there, then the bund, footpath, noting the segregation, and a residential frontage there. And the lower plan just shows the cross section in plan form. These are just some refuse tracking area. These are mentioned in the report. But again, just to show that the landscaping will work with highway movement of vehicles satisfactorily. And these are just contour plans. And again, just to remind members, this is a sloping site. There is north to south, there is about a 4.5 meter grade fall. This is just bringing that into attention. So on that note, I will just go back to the original layout plan And I'll end my presentation there, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So we have two speakers. One is the agent, Mr. Kevin Coleman. Can I invite you, Mr. Coleman, to come forward? Mr. Sismy first, is it? Beg your pardon. We have an objector then in that case, Mr. David Sismy. It's nice to see you again, Mr. Sismy, back in the chamber. So as I'm sure you know,
Chairman.
as I'm sure you know, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and members, thank you for your time. I objected to this application because inter alia it sought to drop a screening hedge from the western end of the new road, which had been a feature of the original permission. This had been a tiny commitment from the developer in its original application, unwilling as they were to incorporate a noise bund next to the relief road, except next to their proposed houses. And so had I not noticed this deletion in the plans for the application, this would have gone the same way as the developer's earlier commitment of a flood alleviation scheme, on which basis arguably the whole location was first identified as a strategic site. So I welcome that the screening hedge has now been added back in, but it shows that it continues to be a huge commitment simply to keep the developer even to their smaller promises. And now before concrete is even poured, or all the conditions of the original permission have been approved, the developer is presiding over its contractors closing parts of Maypole Road for days at a time without highway permits in place and cutting down trees and hedgerows seemingly protected by the conditions of the original application. I'm a big supporter of development in the right locations with the right infrastructure and the build out being considerate to neighbours. I recognise that given the original appeal success, this application today is likely to succeed, but I say this will soon be a huge development in Malden, and it's vital that the council ensures that the developer delivers on the commitments it's made and manages the construction and build out appropriately. That's likely to require much more effort from the enforcement, planning and environmental health teams than I'm afraid has been evident so far. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Sismy. I now call upon the agent, Mr. Kevin Coleman, to come forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. You have 2 minutes only for speaking in line with the scheme. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. As members will be aware and has been touched on already, the North Heybridge Garden Suburb is a key part of the local plan and a key part of the council's land supply. The principles of the development are well established, as the presentations touched on, both through your local plan policies and of course through the outline planning permission itself. We're now working with your officers on discharging the relevant details to allow us to get to the point where we can commence the strategic infrastructure on site and start developing the open space, all as has been pointed out in accordance with the approved phasing plan. The application before the committee tonight seeks approval for reserved matters for landscaping infrastructure only, the key elements being the landscaped open space that will form an attractive entrance feature from Maypole Road, the extensive new tree and hedge planting along the approved relief road, the tree-lined spine road that leads through to the local centre and the new school, the network of accessible footpaths and the extensive areas of open space, including the play area by the local centre. The purpose of this application is to now enable us to make a start on the key pieces of infrastructure and allow the main landscaping and open spaces to become established. Members will note from the update report that the details of the drainage for this part of the site have been approved and it's our intention to deliver these early in the scheme. I would like to thank the Parish Council for highlighting the need to include the hedge on the south side of the relief road, as has been mentioned. Back in July, we amended the plans accordingly to include the hedgerow referred to. There's some 3,746 feet of native hedge planting along the relief road. So from our point of view, the scheme is a quality scheme. It's entirely in accordance with the parameter plans. It's entirely in accordance with your design code. And that's why we're respectively asking for approval tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Coleman. So members, I'll open this up to debate and invite you to put any questions or make any comments you have on the report. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually have a number of questions, if I may. Firstly, in June this year, there was an application for a non-material amendment, 21/00538, which was a change in the wording condition number 9. And if I may, I'll read part of this out. And it states, no development with any part of the site or on any phase of the development shall take place until a detailed surface water drainage scheme for that part of the site or phase based on sustainable drainage principles has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. Now, my question is, first of all, is this class as a part of the development, which has actually been without a drainage scheme that's been produced to council? I haven't seen a scheme for drainage. Can I ask that question first, please?
Are you able to help with that, Mr. Johnson?
Right. Thank you, Chairman. At 5.5.2 of the report, it states, and I'll quickly just run through that paragraph there. The submission relates to the Phase 1 strategic landscaping and provides details of the size, location and gradients of the surface water attenuation basins and drainage network within this phase of the development. The submission follows the parameter plans, set out outline stage, as well as the overall agreed drainage strategy. The technical details of the surface water drainage scheme are dealt with through condition 9 of the original hybrid consent, and there is a current submission in relation to this condition at 21/05125 DET, which is a discharge. So there's a current application which is currently before officers, which is undetermined.
Detailing the flood, the floods.
Yeah, details of the surface water drainage scheme.
All right, and that's coming. Okay.
And then just to give a context to that, at 5.5.3, the agreed drainage strategy is that due to the relatively shallow groundwater, infiltration drainage techniques will not be utilized on the sites. However, other SUDS techniques will be used, which will allow the SUDS train submitted as part of the FRA to 15/00419. So there is a link back to the outline application, the hybrid application, which was approved in 2019. So the thing is, to get the comprehensive appreciation, it's looking at the several documents concurrently. There is the outline scheme. There is the flood risk assessment within that scheme. There is the discharge of conditions under current 9, which are coming forward. This application is not the detailed application regarding the flood alleviation scheme. This is how it sits within the landscape context.
Thank you.
Thank you,
according, if I come back.
Can I just say, though, that there is an error. There is a member's update on this. There is an error at the end of paragraph 5.5.2. And the final sentence says there is a current submission under condition 9 for drainage. And this is for phase 2 drainage. So the drainage that goes with this is a reserved matters, which has already been approved under another application.
But the wording of the amendment of the word of number 9 states that no development shall take place until a drainage system has been approved by the local authority.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, just to clarify, well, that's the key word there. No development shall take place. It doesn't mean
But
you
is
can't.
this part of it? Is this class as development?
No, this is the application.
Okay.
If you understand what I mean, it's the submission of the application. If members approve this, this again will be tied in with details of any other application in terms of when development can commence.
Chairman, can I come back? The landscaping, I was going to ask about the spine road, but you've clarified what that is now. The landscaping for the relief road includes, as we've just mentioned, attenuation basins, which is part of the flood alleviation or the SUDS.
Sorry, Chairman, could you just repeat? Sorry, not Chairman.
The landscaping
Councillor.
for the relief road includes, as you mentioned, attenuation basins, which is part of the SUDS, which we haven't got before us.
Right. Well, what's flanking the relief roads is the landscaping proposal, which includes the swales.
Okay.
So those are the ditches that will
And
run alongside.
the ditches and the culverts.
The ditches and the ditches and the culverts as part of this landscaping scheme.
Okay, thank you. If I may, Chairman, another question. The trees being cut down, how is the management of those trees being replanted going to be looked at? Or some of them, because some of them have to stay down because obviously the road's going to be built. But there are trees going to, in some of the conditions, trees are to be replanted along the relief road and along Maypole Road. Or is that part of another application to come in or reserved matters?
Right, thank you, Councillor. As I said, there are a number of documents that form a suite of how this application is going to be coming forward. Some have been approved already. Some have been part of the hybrid application, which was allowed on appeal. Some will be subject to discharge of conditions. Now, in relation to the trees, which you mentioned and I am fully aware of, these were, and if I just take from this information, this clarification, which I got from the developer regarding this, and if I can just read it to give you that context. As part of the hybrid planning permission, the arboricultural impact assessment submitted and agreed identified a number of trees and hedges to be removed as to facilitate the construction of the relief road. Some limited arboricultural works have recently been undertaken along Broad Street Green Road in line with the approved arboricultural impact assessment. That was in 2015.
Yes,
Yeah,
I've read that.
2015.
741.
Yeah. These works fall within the hatched area and are permitted by condition 18. In light of this, and this is, well, this was obviously the issue we were considering as to whether there was a breach of planning control.
Yes.
And having looked at that, looked at the details, corresponded that with the hatched area, so far there is no breach of planning control that has been identified.
Yes, thank you. But I was just concerned about replanting. How is that going to be managed? Are we going to manage or see how that the developer actually
will be
replants
part,
trees?
yeah, that will be part of the overall landscaping scheme. Just to continue that, and then again, just to give some, because I imagine this matter would have come up. Notwithstanding this, the trees and hedges were inspected for nesting birds and the presence of suitable roosting features for bats. So that was also covered as part of that consideration. The arboricultural impact assessment submitted and agreed detailed the removal, as I said, of these trees along the section of Maypole Road, and this includes a section of hedging. We touched on the hedging earlier, and the new hedging that will be planted along there. So as part of the overall landscaping scheme, there will be a comprehensive tree planting and tree replacement scheme.
Okay, thank you. And if I have further questions, Chairman, if I may.
Yes, please.
I'm glad to see that Heybridge Parish Council, when they put in their response for hedgerows, has been taken into consideration, and you are planting, was it 3,000 something foot of hedgerows along the relief road? Is that about north and south?
Mr. Coleman put it in feet. I had it in
1.5 kilometres. Then.
I had it in metric.
1,114 then.
Yes, exactly.
Is that north and south north of the Lake Relief Road and south, both sides. Right. Thank you.
Just on that, I think that there are details of planting on pages 20 and 21, I think.
I've been reading this for 2 days, and it's can I? Sorry, I'll give way to anyone.
Okay, Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've actually got 4 questions, but shall I give you all the questions at once and then wait for the answers, or do you want them one at a time? I've only got...
This is them one at a time.
Right, okay. The first one is under 5.6. There doesn't appear to be a Natural England Biodiversity Matrix version 3, which Natural England recommend for all planning applications, and indeed I've got pretty good experience of them, because trees and grass and general greenery are not biodiversity increases. You have to have certain things, and it's worked out on a formal matrix to get the biodiversity impacts, and it also gives you what the harm is, and then you should increase it by at least 10% on a large application to actually cover the biodiversity harm. So that is the first one.
Thank you, Councillor. The only point I can draw on that is that, as set out in the report, Natural England have stated that contingent upon the application aligning with the recreational disturbance mitigation package outlined in the HRA dated 15th of the 8th, 2019. They have no objections to this reserved matters application.
Yes, but when I understand that, that's the RAMS agreement. That's a totally separate thing. The biodiversity matrix is something that applicants should do and authorities should be aware of, because it's an absolute clinical diagnosis of the state of the ground now, the harm that the development does, and how you are going to mitigate the harm. And I would have thought, or would have hoped, that the authority, I've mentioned this with every large application in the district, and I asked the authority to take on board that we actually start getting these reports done and actually evaluate them, because otherwise it's just the applicant's consultant saying, oh, well, we'll add some grass here and some water there, but that isn't how the biodiversity matrix works. You know, some things have a high biodiversity gain and others don't. So how do we know what the harm is, and how do we know what the gain is unless we have this biodiversity matrix? So that's the first thing I would say. I think this should be deferred until we get this, because for me there's not enough information regarding the biodiversity harm and mitigation. So that's the first question, but I understand that we've not done one.
Well, just coming back on that, I mean, if we look at the commentary from Place Services Ecology, and this is specific to this type of application, they were consulted specifically on these matters, and would comment accordingly as to what is appropriate.
If I might come back, it's just that they haven't got a technical tool for actually diagnosing it. Just saying, well, there's a field there. Surely, with a big development as sensitive as this, we should absolutely be doing our best. And it's part of our policies to actually improve and enhance the natural biodiversity of our very important district and improve the green infrastructure. We get it at every meeting that we go to. Anyway, I won't go about that. Hopefully, we'll raise it afterwards.
But again, just to reiterate, and as I've said with some answers before, this is a reserved matters application. It's on the back of an outline application. There was a very detailed HRA submission as part of that outline application. These are the details which are stemming from it, which they're flowing from. The matter you're relating to is if the application had come to us in the first instance, these are the broad parameters that we would be seeking to secure in those applications. This is a reserved matters application, drilling down to the details once those broad parameters have been considered. Hence, that's why that's not addressed under this application. The broad context of that has been agreed under the outline or hybrid application, and hence the response of the statutory consultees, which we have in this report. There is no requirement for that under these reports because of the nature of these reports, but also how they fit in with the overall outline scheme.
But I thought this was a formal requirement by the government to actually put these in, and it started off with Matrix 1, Matrix 2, and Matrix 3 is the new one. And I understand it's going to be compulsory to have a 10% habitat gain. And I understood that Natural England advised that the way to get a secure gain or an accurate gain was to use the matrix. Or does Malden not bother with that?
I can't really say much more about this, councillor, but just to repeat what I've just said, this is a reserve matters on the back of a hybrid application where the broad principles of the whole development has been considered. Thank you.
Okay, right. Okay. Well, I've got my next question.
Just before you do that, Councillor White,
Yeah.
I've just got, just looking up here, this biodiversity metric was only published on the 7th of July
That
this
was
year.
the new one, but you had version 2 before version 3, and then version 1. Version 3 is the latest one, so it could have been 2 or 1.
Okay, thank you. What's your next question?
The next question is, I've got it on my phone. Under 5.7.2, the parking, I'm concerned about the routes in and out for the rescue trucks and fire and rescue because they look very narrow to me. Are they going to have double yellow lines on them, and are people going to be allowed to park on them? Because obviously that becomes an issue in these modern estates with their very narrow roads. I'm an HGV driver, so that's a concern because I know you sometimes in big lorries or big trucks, you can get in, but you can't always get out, particularly if they're rigids. I know the refuse trucks are very small butty lorries, so they don't have the long wheelbase, but that's still an issue. And while I'm on the roads infrastructure, what I don't seem to have is anything. You mentioned condition 28 with the footpaths and cycle routes, but as another Malden District Council policy, we had in that every single new application, this has been policy for a long time, that we would have bridleways along with footpaths and cycle paths. And yet again, unless I'm wrong, I can't see any mention of bridleways. So the two road-related issues.
I'm not sure the yellow lines would relate to this application. No, I don't think so. This is just for landscaping, and this is for landscaping, the phase 1 of the entrance green, the spine road, the green corridors.
Spine roads, yeah.
Yeah, and the acoustic bund. That's what we're looking
That comes under spine roads because these spine roads are what, when I read the report, it's what the fire and the refuse vehicles have to use, and they look narrow to me. As though I'm not very good on widths, but we've got other HGV drivers who are probably better than I am. What happens in these modern estates is you get people parking on them and you can't get these lorries through. They block all the spine roads up. So are they going to have parking? Are they going to have prohibited parking? I mean, these are important for the spine roads. The little residential ones, not so much.
I have to stop you there, Councillor White, because this is not about yellow lines.
Right, okay. So the last thing then is on, I also have concerns with the flood alleviation, not the scheme itself, not the bunds. My concern is every single time we have an outline application and we do reserve matters, they say we can't sort out the flood alleviation now and the funding. We've got to approve the permission first, then we sort out the flood alleviation and the funding afterwards. Every single time we approve the application and between the developers and the Environment Agency, it's unviable, we can't do it, bad luck Malden, you're not going to get it. So my other concern is, can we defer this until we get the agreement, not necessarily refuse it, but certainly defer it until we have a concrete scheme in place and who's going to fund it, whether it's the Environment Agency. You know, I don't mind who funds it, but I just think we need it first. Otherwise, we approve them and everybody goes, oh, sorry, you approved it. Bad luck. So let's try and do it the other way around and be a bit proactive and get the cart, or the horse first, not the cart. Sorry.
I think, again, we just have to re-emphasize that this is for landscaping proposals. It includes the details of where the attenuation basins will be and how they will be dealt with. But this application is not the detailed SODS application. That was covered under matters raised by Councillor Edwards.
No, I understand that by
Councillor
23.
White,
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Councillor
Chairman.
White, can I just also add that there's been no objection from the Environment Agency. There's been no objection from Essex County Council Highways, and the Essex County Council SUDS Local Flood Authority have also reviewed this. These are all on page 33. And again, they don't object to the granting of the planning permission for phase 1. Okay, Councillor Hull.
Thank you very much. I'm just coming back. There's plenty of footpaths and cycleways, which is great. But once again, why is there no bridleways in the plans? Essex has got one of the largest population of horses and horse riders. The roads are getting really busy, and it was my belief that all new applications should have a bridleway included in them.
Thank you, Chair. I think, again, I have to go back to the fact that this is a reserved matters application. This is submitted on the back of the outline application. As mentioned earlier, there were a number of parameter plans which the reserved matters applications has to comply with. There was no requirement under the original submission for bridleways to be delivered under phase 1. At this moment, I can't speak about the other phases, but under this application, because this relates specifically to the landscaping and other elements of movement, as set out in the report, there is no reference to bridleways because there is no submission for bridleways as part of this, and no requirement as such under this application for us to, for example, consider a refusal of this application because there is not a bridleway. So it's not incumbent upon us under this application to have regard or to introduce that matter for consideration with this application, as much as I do appreciate what you're saying. Thank you, Chairman.
Would you?
It does say also on page 9, I believe. No, sorry, that's another. That's okay. Councillor Channer.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate this is reserved matters application. We had the outline, but the lead local flood authority did make it clear regarding the application that it needed to comply with the conditions that were applied to the outline approval. And the officer says noted and discussed those conditions shall remain. Well, I'm sorry, Chairman, but I mean, the conditions here have an awful lot of detail of according to the following approved plans and documents. And I don't know if anyone else has had the time to read through all these. I'm not a professional to understand every element of this. Can the officer thereby give us total assurances that this reserved matters application does comply with all the details and conditions and requirements of the outline? I ask this because I have been in a committee previously at area level whereby an officer picked up a slight difference between what was before the authority in the reserved matters to that within the outline. So I want complete assurances from officers that this reserved matters application is totally compliant with the outline that was approved. Also, I'd like to know, out of interest, have any works commenced on the site? Have any trees or any elements been dabbled with, cut down that perhaps shouldn't have been ahead of these works, or to do with other matters surrounding any development on this proposal? And I would like assurances. I think, Chairman, also, I notice under the informatives there's about a commuted sum required, possibly. And I'm very, very surprised to see that within the informative number 4 regarding trees and non-standard materials equipment. Within the existing extent of the public highway, they will require contribution commuted sum to cover the cost of future maintenance for a period of 15 years. Is that the sort of thing that ordinarily would be in an informative? Surely that should have been picked up at some stage. I'm not sure what stage, whether this stage, but I'm a bit shocked to find elements of a commuted sum being referred to in informative only. I think that's part of the concern of members, that all monies through any approvals we give are clearly defined in any approval to ensure those commuted sums do come forward, Chairman. So I'm just very concerned. And are these conditions sufficient really to cover all the elements of this application before us? And I say, Chairman, I was not through laziness. With all due respect, I have not had time to read every detail contained within all these documents. I'm not sure if other members have, but also not having the professional brain. I just need all those assurances from the officer, please, Chairman. and about any works happening on site and any trees removed, hedgerows removed or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. No works that would constitute the commencement of development has taken place on the site. So I will say that categorically. What works have taken place on the site are works which are to facilitate the investigation to then inform submissions to discharge conditions. So in relation to that, I will speak to the archaeological work which has taken place on the site. There can be confusion as to what does commence development, but what was implicit within the conditions on the outline permission is that, and if we're looking at, for example, the written scheme of investigation regarding these matters, which provide the context for which one will carry out the investigative works to inform the conditions, these were required to be done before the details can be submitted. Again, with my enforcement hat, I'm fully aware of the issues around that, for example, and how that has related to works currently taking place on site. Again, similarly, in terms of the trees, the response is as stated to Councillor Edwards regarding those matters on the trees. Those are not a commencement of the works. Those are trees which have been agreed under plans approved previously to be removed to facilitate the development as and when that element of the development comes forward. The other matter you raised, Councillor Channer, was regarding the informative. I think the key thing on point 4 of the informatives is that it states any trees and non-standard materials, equipment proposed within the existing extent of the public highway. So that's the key element there. And in terms of the commuted sum, this is not the commuted sums in which we would normally agree as part of the development proposal. But this is something would be solely they'd have to manage with the Highways Authority, as opposed to through this application and the District Planning Authority. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. You may, yeah, yes.
Assurances that this reserve application complies with all the elements required of the outline that this is related to. That is what I'm seeking, because as I said previously, there were an awful lot of the list here as long as my arm, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but I said I can't possibly, you know, look at these, there's a lot of detail in some of these. I'm sorry, I'm not a professional, but I need assurances. This application complies wholly with the outline application for what's available regarding the conditions. The local flood authority raised the point about condition needs to be applied as exactly the same as the outline, and not the opposite response was that condition will remain under the outline. I hear what you're saying about the trees and hedgerows, and obviously Councillor Edwards has raised issues as well. I mean, just so long as there's been no breach of Hedgerows Act or anything like that going forward, because agri hedges, I understand fences that can apply there without permission in and out of season. I'm aware of some residents, you know.
Is this a question, Councillor Channer? Because yeah, could we get to it?
Well, I've asked it, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not on line. With all due respect, Chairman, I asked it at the start of my question. I said I don't know that the officer had answered my question. Perhaps I hadn't heard it in the right context. Can the officer assure me that this reserved application complies totally with that of the outline? All the conditions, bearing in mind what the lead flood authority have said regarding a condition, bearing in mind the monumental list of documents here that probably members were expected to read through to understand it, and I've attempted to, but they're very, very detailed, Chairman, and I'm not a professional in all this. So that is why I started off my first question with that, and I'm not sure I heard the answer. I want those assurances, Chairman. And I
Okay,
have asked
let's
now
see.
about the Hedgerows Act. Hope that makes it clear. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chairman. Because I did believe I was answering several questions, but I can give the councillor the assurances that this reserve matters will comply with those conditions. That is the substance of us assessing these applications. This is a strategic application. It's been subject to, even as part of the reserve matters pre-applications, there have been planning performance agreements discussing these in extreme details over the last 18 months at least. We have comprehensively compared the conditions on the outline scheme, hence the copious cross-references that you can see within the report, which I do understand, and that was one of the reasons why I set out initially that there are also a suite of accompanying applications, discharge of conditions, non-material applications, which all form part of this context. And I do appreciate it does seem like a bit of a jigsaw, but we have comprehensively gone through this, for want of better terminology, picked up the developer where we felt it was necessary, sought clarification, sought the relevant amendments, and we've also sought the relevant assurances written into their submissions. So we are confident, and that's why this report is in front of you, that those assurances can be satisfied. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, thank you. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This may fall into the remit of this conversation, but it's to do with the acoustic bund and the fence that's shown on slide 19 of the slide pack. With the relief road and the swale, it gives a drawing. It's 15 metres wide, and obviously with a deflective fence at the top and large mature grown trees in there. It's a divine place to live because there's the smallest car illustrated shown here. So it'll be a very quiet road, I'd expect. But has the engineering information considered the volume of traffic at its peak when the whole thing's built out, the different acoustic variations that will come from the time when the bund is actually established to when the houses are built in to the trees that will probably be growing up? So i.e., would it be really, really noisy at first and then take many years to grow? Because the volume of houses that we're putting in this monster build is vast. So I want to know, has that engineering report, is it in these documents? Because I can't find it, and like Councillor Chan, I'm no expert and I haven't read every single detail, but I'm interested in that, on the noise effect of the people who will be living actually close to the road, and the effect of the earth bund. So that's the first point. And the second point is to do with the leap and the orchard. I noticed that there's a generous 14 trees, 7 on either side of the orchard. Is there any chance that that could actually be made into a more of a significant number of trees rather than just 7 on either side? Or is that drawing locked in, hook, line and sinker? Because they better like sharing if they're apple trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just dealing with your second question, the drawing that we have, I assume you got the number 14 by counting them. Is that correct?
I've managed to use all my fingers. Thank you.
Sorry, just give me a second there.
Is it 5211? Page 21, I think.
So this one. Yeah, but thank you, Chairman, for just drawing that out. I mean, 5.2.11 speaks about the green and blue infrastructure parameter plans, and that the submission conforms with this parameter plan with the location and extent of open space adhering, talks about the leap. But I would also just sort of cross-reference that in terms of the arboricultural assessment under 5.7.3, where the council's tree consultant has been consulted in terms of that. He has agreed that that is satisfactory. I can't say that the number 14 in terms of a density was stated specifically as being satisfactory or unsatisfactory, but by his support of the scheme, it is considered to be acceptable. So that's my response to that. Now, in terms of the earth bond, the applicant.
Could I just pause you there? Did you want to come back on that point, Councillor?
Yes, I just thank you, Chairman. Appreciate it. Very short, members. So again, because it's always a learning curve for me. So with these plans, if I look and see what's here, this is what will be here because it's deemed as acceptable. So there's no variation to be able to say that they would look at that and potentially increase the density to a decent amount of different type of planting. Is that correct? What's here is here, and this is cast in stone because people think that's fine.
Well, on the face of it, that is correct, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Just in terms of the earth bond, the application was supported by a acoustic assessment specific to the earth bond. The appropriate modelling for that type of structure with that road, with its relationship to and the interface with residential had been carried out as part of that assessment. And the earth bond, I know when you posed your question initially, it was sort of a timeline, maturity, volume of traffic over X period. I do appreciate that. These assessments are normally based on a worst case scenario, given the expected volume of traffic over a given period with this scale of development. That takes place, that's part of the sort of basic inputs into these modelling packages. Again, what I would also say, and as mentioned with on other comments earlier, there's a whole package of measures when it comes to these to this type of scheme, an outline with a reserve matters. And what will accompany this, but not part of this application, is when the residential developments come forward, and that the residential developments themselves will have to conform with a form of detail and material that is appropriate for that relationship with that road. And while I can't put my hand on the line immediately, that is stated within the report as well, as a sort of a heads up in terms of how the whole acoustic environment of the road and the housing development will be developed coming forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And you had a question about the bund, Councillor Lagan, did you?
Yeah, just to follow, because it does mention, Chair, that it says no, for additional information on the acoustic bund and fence, please refer to the engineer's drawings, but I'd like to see those drawings to look at the plan as what Mr. Johnson just said, with the progressive nature of the materials, etc., that could be used, because that modelling would have to be done, as you quite rightly said, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, the details about the materials, that's not part of the plans, because the materials relates to the residential development, which will come forward in future phases. But I mean, we've got the section there. I believe there is another more detailed plan, but I'd have to scan through it to find exactly where it is, which I think does show some fencing elements. And I do apologise, I could be going the wrong way. So that's the timber bridge details.
Couldn't find it when
I wouldn't be able to put my hand on it right now, unless members want me to go through that.
through the chair, I think probably not necessarily to go through and dig down, but I think it's an important informative document to look at, because noise, especially with the environment that we're talking about, the volume of housing and the potential volume of traffic up there, the noise is harmful. So I'd like to make sure that this is mitigated to the maximum effect. Thank you.
But, you know, as I said, I mean, there is allusions to that within the report. If I come across it, I will, through the chair, just bring that back to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Fluker is next.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm grateful. Question for Mr. Johnson, just clarity really regarding the local development plan and strategic sites. Is it a requirement of strategic sites to provide for bridleways? I've got two further questions dependent on the answer to that.
I think not on this application, as it was.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, there isn't a sort of carte blanche requirement for the provision of bridleways.
Could you turn your microphone off, please?
Yeah. There isn't a carte blanche requirement for the provision of bridleways. Those are matters that would, in using the local plan, we'd consider in terms of its local requirements. Yeah, they may be specific or appropriate as part of local character, local amenities in some areas, but there isn't that specific requirement that if a bridleway is not provided, an application could be potentially refused.
Yeah, Chairman, would you allow me to come back on that? Because we often tie ourselves up with outline planning permission, and what concerns me about this, and if I can take members' attention to paragraph 3.1.3, and it says quite clearly that we are going to consider future landscaping reserve matters applications, and I get that. I think the next paragraph means that where it says the submission, I think it means this submission covers the strategic landscaping. I think I've got that right. And if that is the case, what could happen is we could approve this outline application for all of the strategic matters, and then when it comes to something like a bridleway, the applicant could say, well, you haven't considered this within the strategic application, which covers landscaping, roads, paths and open spaces and earthworks, and that follows that it could be that there is no way to include bridleways if we agree that. Now, that's the way I look at this. So I think that, you know, we don't want to tie ourselves over this. And I think this is certainly what Councillor White, and to a lesser extent, my other equine friend from Burnham, was alluding to as well. You know, we really want to be careful because bridleways are quite big. So, you know, if the developers then got to incorporate bridleways into this scheme, they may well come back and say, I'm sorry, you've dealt with the strategic landscape and there is no more room. Chairman, I think I've made my point. Yes. And I think we would be, I think, you know, if members were mindful to approve this outline application, I think we should be mindful of that too, and perhaps an amendment. Thank you.
Okay, yes, do you want to answer that, Mr. Johnson? Yeah.
Yeah,
this is a condition, perhaps.
So, well, I was going to sort of make a point. This is within the context of an outline plan, a hybrid application. The Relief Road has got detailed approval. The locations of the parcels of land has got broad approval in terms of with their locations where they will go. Parameters are set in terms of, you know, widths of road, widths of footways, etc. As Councillor Fluker pointed out, and from my own experience, I'll add the size of a bridleway, adding this into a scheme in which the strategic routes through the site has already been agreed would substantially alter the character of this application in terms of its outline context. These are matters that would be considered or should have been considered if they weren't considered. Clearly, I wasn't in the authority at the time on the more strategic level in terms of these bridleways. I personally would be concerned, and this is a matter relating to this element of the proposal. This is I don't know, 20% of the scheme. This is phase 1 of 5. If we're talking about bridleways, how are we talking about bridleway? This application does not relate to the full length of the relief road, for example. This application does not relate to the full length of the spine road. Sort of where do you start and where do you begin in terms of considering this? Because the application in front of us relates to phase 1 only, not the other adjoining phases. That would be part of a more strategic arrangement, but that's not the purpose of this application. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, I'm going to move on now. Councillor Swain, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I actually have 3 areas that I wanted to ask some questions on or observations. Continuing with this, the ring road issue, and I note from the drawings that was put up that the road seems to be elevated slightly from the natural terrain, and I'm concerned about the noise outwards. A lot has been said about noise protection for the residential area itself, but is there any provisions for serious noise and visual mitigation on the outside of this this ring road, or is that treated as the highway's responsibility? Secondly, and I'm assuming that that fund will be largely built up from material excavated on site. The other point is about access from the residential areas to across the ring road. I'm not sure whether there's any provision for that, but it is rather essential that people can relate to the countryside beyond the development. That's the first area, Chairman.
Okay, Mr Johnson. So the ring road, noise outwards, and the access road across the ring road. Access.
Thank you, Chairman. So just for clarification, Councillor Stein, when you say the ring road, do you mean the relief road, or do you mean the relief road? I just wanted to clarify, it wasn't the spine road we're talking about.
No,
the relief road. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So specifically in terms of noise out, do you mean noise from the ring road and how that would impact on the development?
I'm talking about noise outwards to the open countryside and how that will actually impact on whether our mitigation measures on the outside of that road to deal with noise and visual intrusion.
Well, as I said before, and as stated in the report, the road was part of the detailed elements of the original application. So the road is set in terms of where it is and its relationship, etc. Yeah. As part of this landscaping scheme, and this plan here, I think, is ideal in that sense. It does show the amount of hedgerows to be aligned along the northern and the southern part. Well, the northern and southern in terms of the western section of the relief road, where it abuts the countryside or the more open land areas. And then to the east of Maypole Road, on the northern side, again, there is that continuation of the hedgerow line, again, which was alluded to earlier. So in terms of noise attenuation, in terms of its visual impact, there will be landscaping relief in that sense.
So we're simply reliant upon a hedgerow on the outer side of this road.
That is a scheme that we have in front of us. I'm not sure what other matters.
What I was getting at, is it a responsibility of the developer to produce something more effective in terms of noise and visual impact outwards to the countryside?
Well, in terms of this application, the landscaping proposals is considered to be acceptable in terms of the recommendation put in front of you.
Okay, what's your next question?
Yes, the second concerns SUDs, which obviously could be well used in future for retaining flood waters. I would like to have some idea of what is the percentage of the green space that is actually going to be taken up with these swales and attenuation ponds and so on, because it seems to me they, from a practical point of view, not only is there a risk for children if you do have a lot of water in some of these deeper swales, but actually they're not really contributing much as green space for the community. So it's a question of whether, whether the amount needed to satisfy the Essex County Council on flood alleviation actually minimises or reduces greatly the effective green space that residents will be able to use.
All right, thank you, Chair. The attenuation measures in this proposal do serve a dual purpose. In drier times, they have been so designed and landscaped, particularly in terms of access to them, sort of shallow accesses, that they can be used for recreational purposes. Clearly, in times of heavy rainfall or flood situations, they will not be used at those times. This is a single element of a 5-phase proposal for this redevelopment site. I can't say what percentage overall that they represent in terms of the green space that the community can use for recreational purposes. So that I can't comment on. This is just a discrete element. Sorry, there was another part to your question that I thought you mentioned. That might have escaped me.
Well, I was concerned that if these are these swales and attenuation areas do have a significant amount of water, do they not constitute a risk, a safety risk for residents, very young residents?
Well, in that safety risk would have been considered in terms of the evaluation of them through the Sustainable Urban Drainage Scheme. It is not considered that the risk that you might have in mind is not the risk that the experts have assessed that would take place in terms of risk to, I don't know, life and limb, if you want to put it that way.
I think at this stage, if I refer to page 33, this is the Essex County Council SUDS lead local flood authority, and they don't have any objections to that. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that's relevant to this application.
Okay, I've read that, and maybe there's more to be said when it comes to a detailed stage on this. My third one concerns archaeological investigations. It is said that there are some, we expect that there were archaeological artifacts and interest in this area, and it says in some section that more work is needed to be done on that, more investigation, and yet it doesn't. It says the development or progress with the development won't have an impact. But if you're digging out all these swales, attenuation ponds, and putting in roads and so on, isn't that going to actually rather destroy areas which might have been worth excavating for archaeological purposes?
I mean, I think as I mentioned on another question previously, this application is to consider the landscaping elements. It doesn't circumvent the need for the archaeological explorations to take place. The archaeological exploration, and to satisfy that condition, is sort of scheme wide. So if this application was approved today, it doesn't mean they could sort of, run along the next day and excavate these areas and not have carried out the archaeological investigations. It doesn't mean that at all.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Boyce.
Thank you, Chairman. This seems to me like somebody sitting down with a sheepskin, a sheep fleece rather, and carding it, spinning it, weaving it, sewing it together to make a garment. At each stage there could be a drop stitch. And I think members' concerns here is dealing with an application as large as this, with reserved matters coming in on individual cases, that members are concerned that there will be a misstitch somewhere, that it's not quite knitted or sewn together, the whole thing, and something will go amiss. I think Councillor Fluker referred to it, as did Councillor White and Hull. But on condition 1, remembering again that this is a reserved matter for whatever it is, but condition 1 says articulated vehicle tracking and bus tracking. Mr. Johnson, I think, said as earlier that transport wasn't an issue here, but there is development shall be carried out in accordance with the following approved plans and documents. So therefore, unless articulated vehicle tracking means something different to what I think it means, Councillor White's issues were very relevant to this application.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, just taking the tracking drawings which you saw earlier and as referred to in proposed conditions. I mean, if we look at 5.7.2 and the waste comments, they've confirmed that the vehicle tracking for the refuse vehicles into the different parcels appear to be sufficient to allow the 26-ton refuse vehicles to drive in and out of each parcel. As part of any residential reserve matter submission, consideration will be given to individual houses and or communal collection points. So in terms of the strategic elements, the use of vehicles of that size necessary to service this type of development in and out of the various areas, not into the discrete areas, but in and out of these broad areas, just as outlined on this element of the application, these are considered to be satisfactory. And there are no objections.
Chairman,
Yes, Boyce, you want to come back?
this in my view, contradicts the issues that Councillor Channer raised and Councillor White. They were concerned and Councillor Channer asked for assurances that the outline condition complies with, etc., etc. But we do seem to have a dichotomy here. Mr. Johnson's saying that the issue of yellow lines it came down to wasn't a matter for this application, but one of the conditions relates to large vehicle movements, which Ms. White referred.
I'm not. Well, I think as said before, and I think if you don't mind me saying, Chairman, I think Councillor Hurd mentioned this point. Yellow lines and the physical development of a highway in terms of its width, its capacity, junctions and radii, etc. Yeah, which is what this relates to in terms of tracking, is not the same as highway management, which we're talking about in terms of yellow line. So I don't see there being a dichotomy. They're clearly two different matters. Yellow lines, and it depends on whether roads within this development would be adopted by the local highway or not. They could be adopted, they may not be adopted. If they're not adopted, they're not subject to those sorts of controls. So this application just relates to these physical matters which we consider under a planning application and in the context of this reserve matters for this parcel. I don't see there being a dichotomy at all.
No, I would say again, the Essex County Council highways have been asked to comment. They have commented and they've no objections to make on this proposal, which is for landscaping. Councillor Morris.
Thank you. I'd just like to take this opportunity to voice what my residents believe of this development, which is that it is awful. For the obvious reasons, schools, doctors, transport, various other things like that, things that we've heard 1,000 times that we don't address. I'd just like to ask Mr. Johnson, I've only got this opportunity to really do it, if this isn't anything to do with the reserve matters that are here today, if you could let me know, please. I've got two questions. I'd like to know that at the end of Heybridge Approach, we have the roundabout, and the roundabout basically should have been opened and ran straight, you know, up from Heybridge Approach, but instead we decided to run the little relief road off of Langford Road, which doesn't make much sense to me and looks like it'll cause more traffic. This is now being called the Langford Rectory Bypass. I was wondering if I could get some reasons as to why we didn't open up the roundabout. And, you know, we've run literally the relief road around the houses. And the second one is, in layman's terms, please, Mr. Johnson, could we let everyone know, because I'm hoping that we've got a few residents from Heybridge watching on the YouTube right now, could you tell us in layman's terms what is going to happen about the risk of flooding? What are we actually going to do to mitigate flooding? Please, no acronyms, no planning terminology, just some layman's terms for the residents of Heybridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the relief road strategy, its location, all its details, that has already been agreed. That's not part of this application, but I think as mentioned, because the landscaping flanks it, it's to just remind members that where the road is, where the roundabout is, where everything is, that is already fixed. We can't go back on that. So that would answer that first question. In terms of the second question, and trying to put it in layperson's terms, we did discuss some of these matters in terms of some of the questions there earlier. This application is about the landscaping. It's not about the SUDS application. It details where the relevant attenuation, the ponds, are going to go as part of the landscaping scheme, and how they can be incorporated into the landscaping scheme, so they're not just ditches waiting to be filled with water. They can be used for substantial, well, I won't say substantial, others with local knowledge may know more than me, but with, you know, a fair amount of the year they will be used for recreational purposes, and basically how they will contribute to the landscape and design ethos of the area, but they are not the landscaping scheme. And I couldn't answer your question in any event, because this is just one discrete element of the overall proposal.
It's not me. Kind of interference somewhere. Okay, we're all right now. Thank you.
Yeah, this is just one element of it, proposing the contribution of this part, this phase of the 5-phase development of the garden suburb, in terms of where its flood alleviation system would go. It can't speak for the whole of the development under this application. In fact, it can't even speak fully for this one. It's just showing where it goes. And I think there are other accompanying documents, as mentioned before, that would need to be read, and that will also be coming forward.
Okay,
Sorry, that's the best I can say.
Yes,
without signing too
but
technical.
I also refer you to page 33. These are comments from the Essex County Council Highways and the SUDs.
I've read them.
Yeah.
I've read them.
Okay. What's your supplementary, please?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I always find you very informative and diligent, so thank you for that. So just to reiterate, though, the roundabout that I'm going to refer to as the Langford Rectory bypass. Could you please let me know? I know it's already done and dusted, but I would still like to know, because I did ask way back and didn't get an answer from anyone, not yourself. So I'd like to know about the Heybridge approach roundabout Langford Rectory bypass. And are you basically saying that currently is all we're going to have is some ponds to collect the possible floodwater?
Well, I mean, they're referred to as ponds, but they are, to use the nomenclature, attenuation basins. They will absorb and soak up, and they will hold water. They will release them naturally, again, to attenuate the flow, sort of ease water cascading down, so to speak. That's their purposes, and that's the reason why they are located where they are, relevant to the water table in that particular area. The gradient of the land, as I mentioned earlier, there's a 4.5 meter slope from north to south of the site, which again is relevant to all, the flooding, and also the fact that with the new development you will have hard surfacing. Materials are yet to be fully agreed, but they will be permeable materials. But again, it's all part of a package of the measures, again, which will be detailed and with concurrent and subsequent applications. But again, this is just one part of the whole development, as mentioned. There are also swales, as mentioned before, running alongside the relief road. There are also culverts to direct the water from off the roads into channels underneath the roads, again, to take it off. So there's a whole package of measures, I understand, in lieu of what was originally anticipated for the site some years back. Thank you.
Okay.
So they're going to do the bare minimum they can get away with and just hope the heavens don't open.
Well, I think he's answered your question, but thank you for that. Councillor Stilts, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I refer to page 28, 5.6.6? We talk about a survey that was done for badger sets and bats, and they actually found that there was an inhabited badger set, and it says here that construction cannot start until a development licence has been legally obtained. Is this going to affect that badger set, and has the developer obtained that licence yet?
Well, the license is not a planning matter. I can't comment on. I mean, that's an obligation. That's a legal obligation on behalf of the developer that they would have to they'd have to obtain before any works can be carried out. Otherwise, they will be flouting the law. If this application was supported today, that does not mean they can go ahead and do this without obtaining any license or any other requirements that they need before development can start.
Is this part of the development going to affect that badger set? Because this is talking about 2022, but is this green bit that we're talking about today, this phase 1, going to affect
it? I'll have to say, Councillor, I don't specifically know where the badger set is, but as it's been mentioned in this application, it will be within this area. I have to say I don't personally know exactly where it is, but it's within this development, hence it being covered under the considerations here.
So they'll need a licence before they can do that anyway. Okay. Councillor Siddle.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we got a bit lost at times in terms of what this application is about. It's not about some of the things that have been discussed this evening. It is about the entrance, it is about green landscaping, and that's the important thing to consider. Yeah. And it is going to come in phases, as Mr. Johnson has said, so we need to consider those phases as they get developed. The interesting about this, the green infrastructure, part of this development is in the Great Totham ward. And if you look at Maypole Road at the moment, there's very little green infrastructure along that road. There's very little hedges. There's trees at the bottom of it when you get to the Heybridge parish. But the rest of that road, there isn't any landscaping. There isn't anything at the moment that stops noise. There isn't anything that then is enhancing the environment. So in many ways, this is adding to and benefiting what we've got. So the interesting is about this is it's actually adding more green infrastructure to this part of the district. In terms of most roads in the district, if you look at them, and they are country roads, and this will be a country road, a B road probably, they don't have lots of noise screening. They have hedgerows. That's the natural environment in the Malden district. Hedgerows, that's what the developer's putting in. So the developer is doing their best to ensure that what's being put here is right for this part of the district. The thing we have to remember with this particular application is this application came forward under the previous administration. We are now doing our best to ensure that this application is fit for purpose. And it's important that we recognise that. So we need to ensure that that is right, but we are considering at the moment the landscaping element, and it's important to concentrate on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, okay, I think we've given that a fair debate. If it's very short, Councillor Channer, I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you, Councillor Swain, and I know Councillor Edwards as the ward member. You wanted to say something else later? Just an observation. Okay, Councillor Channer, briefly, please. I think we've got some interference again.
Is that someone got a light? Right, okay. Well, thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Channer.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I will be quick. Due to a question that Councillor Stilts asked, and I just need to get clarification here, make sure I heard it right, and it was to do with the badger set and about licensing, and Councillor Stilts asked that question. I think the response from the officer was that the licence was a legal matter, not a planning one. However, we have a condition, and bearing in mind conditions have to be reasonable and enforceable. Condition number 3 does relate to a licence being a requirement. It says no set closure shall in any circumstances commence unless the local planning authority has been provided with either a licence issued by Natural England, and B, a statement in writing. So I'm a little bit confused because the officer said a licence was a legal matter, not planning, and yet we're putting on an application, on this application, should it be approved, a condition. And bearing in mind reasonable and enforceable, can I then have assurances therefore, or have I misheard something? Assurances therefore this condition is reasonable and enforceable, or have I misinterpreted what the officer responded, Chairman? I do apologise if I have up front.
Mr Johnson, you're able to answer that.
Thank you. I'm just reading through that.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. My understanding of the condition is that it's no set enclosure shall in any circumstances commence unless the local planning authority has been provided with, etc., etc. The set enclosure is the protective measures for the set. In a way, we can sort of see this like the tree protection measures that we would normally require through conditions. So that's my understanding of this condition and the reason for it. The obtaining of the license itself is not a planning matter. But any development that would be facilitated as a result of the set enclosures, it in itself is a planning matter. So that vindicates the reason for this condition and our awareness, obviously, of the fact that, you know, we are dealing with protective species, although we ourselves can't say that a license needs to be obtained.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Swain. Just briefly.
Thank you, Joe. It's a very quick point of clarification. Is it intended that each phase, that the SUDs in each phase of the development will be capable of dealing with the flood mitigation for that phase?
Thank you, Chairman. It's the flood mitigation for the phase, but that's part of the overall flood strategy. I mean, the overall flood strategy is for the site as a whole. The fact that a particular flood mitigation may be able to deal with the flooding in its discrete area doesn't necessarily mean that that sort of piecemeal approach means that as a whole, it deals with the flooding on the site. The various elements of flooding on these applications is related to the overall strategy for the entire site. These are just the discrete elements of that overall strategy.
Okay, and Councillor Heybridge, your observation, and then I'm going to move to
Just an observation and a clarification, please. An observation is, we were talking about right-of-ways earlier. There are two, I think, riding schools just north of the relief roads, just thought I'd make that point. And the other clarification, you talk about parcels and phases. The phases are 5 phases over the next 10 years, that's correct, isn't it? The parcels are the actual developments of the buildings, which will come separately, is that correct?
Yes.
So phases and then parcels to follow into each phase as each phase is completed, is that?
Yeah, you've got phases and parcels within the phase.
But does a phase, will the parcels follow each phase in that area, in that phase?
Yes.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay, members, so we are...
Recorded vote, please.
Okay, first of all, I'm looking for a proposal, members. The
I'd
proposal
like to make
is...
a proposal, please.
Well, the officer's recommendation is that we approve, subject to conditions. Councillor Swain? Right, okay. In that case, we will go for the vote on that to approve this recommendation. Now, you asked for a recorded vote. Is that seconded? Councillor Lagan seconds that. So that's what we will do then. Ben, are you able to call the roll?
Yes, indeed.
So this is to approve this recommendation as the officer's recommendation. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I will call your names in alphabetical order. Can you please state clearly for, against, or abstain using your microphones? Starting with Councillor Bassinger. We don't seem to have Councillor Bassinger here, but we didn't receive apologies. Okay, thank you. Councillor Miss Beale.
Icon. Against.
Thank you. Councillor Beale. Councillor Brian Beale.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Boyce.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Channa.
For.
Councillor Dewick.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
For.
Councillor Fluker.
For.
Sorry, I seem to. Councillor Hurd.
For.
Councillor Hubner. Councillor Hall.
Against.
Councillor Keys.
For.
Councillor Lagan.
Against.
Councillor Mays. For. Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Against.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
For.
Councillor Stamp.
For.
Councillor Stevens.
For.
Councillor Stilts.
Against.
Councillor Swain.
For.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Against, as I had an alternative proposal, which obviously is lost now.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Members, that's 14 for, 7 against, no abstentions.
Thank you. That is approved then in that case. Thank you. We move on to agenda item 6. This is found on pages 41 to 52. This is McDonald's at Fullbridge, 21/00270/ADV. Mr. Johnson, I think you have the pleasure of this one as well. Okay, so we'll just So I think we just need to note that several members have left the meeting at this stage. There is still sufficient here to be quorate, so I will carry on.
Chairman, can we just minute who's left the meeting, please?
We have Councillor Fluker has left, Councillor Dewick and Councillor Boyce. I think those.
Yes, I've already made a note of that, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
We need to know who's still here then, Chairman.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to move on now to agenda item number 6. This is McDonald's at Fullbridge, found members on pages 41 to 52 of the report. So, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. This application proposes advertisement consent for the installation of 4 number fascia signs to the McDonald's in Fullbridge. So again, we just have the site here. There's a location plan. And here we have an aerial photograph of the existing site. And here we have the existing elevations. What I'll be doing is just flipping between the two because the changes may appear quite subtle, and to just get an appreciation, you may just need to go backwards and forwards between the existing and the proposed. So we can see we've got these, again, standard signage. I think it was mentioned earlier that a number of you are fully aware of the site here. This application seeks to change the nature of the signage in line with their current branding for this site. So again, just to, we've got the various elevations here. And again, just to show you the differences, that triangular section there, the change here, the side elevation there. Again, we can just see the change in color of the roofing materials. Again, on the other side, you can see again, whoops, the change in the emblems there, roofing materials. And again, we can see the changes here. So this is the substance of the application that we're looking at. We can just see the photographs of the site here. As noted from the report, this was it was requested by Central Planning that this be considered by members, given the nature of the voting at that committee. Officer's recommendation is that these are relatively minor changes for the reasons stated, change of branding. and as such, the advertisement applications are recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. I will open this up to the floor. Councillor Morris.
I'd like to propose that we go against the officer's recommendations and refuse this. McDonald's are the largest toy distributor in the world, and I don't think that Malden District Council should have anything to do with promoting such an unhealthy food choice for our young people. Is anyone prepared to second that?
It would appear not. So the proposal is that the officer's recommendation is that we grant advertisement consent. Do I have a seconder? Seconded. Councillor Siddle, thank you. Can we agree that by assent?
Recorded vote, please.
Is that seconded? It is not seconded. Can we agree on that by assent? No. Your is noted. That is noted. Okay. Any other items of business that the chairman of the committee decides are urgent? There are none. Other than to politely request Councillor Morris, if you're going to have a meal, would you kindly not do it in the chamber?
I'll do what I want. Thank you very much, Mark. You're an idiot and a melt. Wendy told me.
I think, Councillor Morris, it is clear that you are on a personal crusade. And you
I think that's your opinion, and I don't value your opinion very much.
It does not. The findings of an independent investigator.
No, it wasn't very independent, though, was it? It wasn't very independent, though, Mark.
Completely without
Wendy
foundation.
thinks you're a melt. Wendy thinks you're an idiot, and so do I.
An alarming code.
I really couldn't care what you think, Mark.
Process.
You are a melt and you are an idiot. Wendy told
your
me.
Capacity to lie.
My capacity to lie. You cover up lies. You cover up lies. You cover up lies. Officers lie to your face and you cover up for them. Officers lie to your face and you cover up for them. You watched homophobic bullying. You watched homophobic bullying go on and you did nothing. You did